Hi, in this video we will be looking at the configuration of the REST connection object in Astera Centerprise. The REST connection object allows the user to configure a connection with a base server URL and authentication. This REST connection object is then shared by all the endpoint operations for an API. To make an API call in Centerprise, the REST connection object needs to be configured first. Drag and drop the REST connection object from the Resources section of the toolbox in Astera Centerprise. Right-click on the object and select Properties from the context menu. This will open a new window. Firstly, you can specify the base URL of the API, which will prepend as a common path to all API endpoints sharing this connection. When a user imports an API definition, a shared REST connection file containing the base URL and authentication type is automatically created within the project. To learn more about importing APIs in Astera Centerprise, please visit our documentation site. The timeout option lets the user specify the duration to wait for the API server to respond before giving a timeout error. Next, there is a drop-down menu present for authentication. Astera Centerprise supports the following authentication types: Auth2, API key, basic authentication, bearer token. Selecting the no authentication option lets the user send API requests without including any authentication parameters. Auth2 is used when an application requires permission to access data on your behalf. Instead of giving away your password to the application, Auth2 enables a delegated authorization through a third-party auth server. In Auth2, you can select these four grant types, such as implicit, authorization code, password, and client credentials. In implicit, you only need to provide an authentication URL and client ID to request token without an intermediate code exchange. In authorization code grant type, you need to provide authentication URL, access token URL, client ID, and optionally a client secret to authorize. In the password grant type, you need access token URL, username, password, client ID, and client secret to authorize. Finally, with client credentials, you need access token URL, client ID, and client secret to authorize. If we look at the next authentication type, the API key authentication is a key value pair that a client provides when it makes an API request. Basic authentication is structured according to the HTTP protocol to provide a username and a password when making a REST request. Finally, the bearer token authentication requires an access token, which is generated by the server in response to a login request. To generate a bearer token, you need a username, password, and a token URL. For our use case, we have selected the Auth2 security type with authorization code grant type. Once done, click Next and you will be led to the next screen. Here, you can see the shared parameters screen. This is where you can define parameters based on your requirements, be it a query or a header parameter. The name of a query or header parameter can be defined here. This option defines whether the parameter has a query location or a header location. Once the data type is selected, a default value can be assigned. The parameters defined here will be inherited in all REST clients that use this shared connection. Once done, click Next and you will be led to the Config Parameters screen. Here, parameter values can be changed according to your application. Parameters not changed will use their default value. Click Next and you will be led to the General Options screen. Here, you can add any comments that you wish to add. Click OK and the REST connection object will be configured. We will now look at the usage of the REST connection object. Firstly, we can use the REST connection object in a data flow. Drag and drop a REST connection object and a REST client object from the toolbox onto the data flow. Configure the REST connection object and open the properties of the REST client object. Here, the shared connections drop-down list shows us the REST connection object present in the same data flow. Secondly, we can use the REST connection object in a project. Add a new project from the Project tab of the main menu bar. Then, right-click on the project or one of its folders and select Add New Item from the context menu. From here, a shared action can be added to the project. Within the shared action file, drag and drop a REST connection object from the toolbox. The REST connection object can be used in any flow document contained in the same project. Configure the object and save the shared action file. Open a new data flow and drag and drop a REST client object. Open its properties and you will be able to see the name of the shared connection within this drop-down menu. This concludes our discussion on the use of the REST connection object in Astera Centerprise. For more information on Astera Centerprise, please visit our documentation site. Thank you for watching this video.